something a little bit different. And we're actually bringing on a guest who has actually reached out, UX designer and graduate of Academy XI, where I'm an instructor, reached out asking questions about making that transition from UX, which is a field that's really defined product development and is this new emerging field, or really a name and a set of practices around one of the most integral parts of product design and development. My background is actually in UX, user experience, brand experience, things like that. And so I felt a similar interest in virtual reality when I was like, this is the future of user experience. This is also a place where you can make your mark in a highly saturated field. I kind of figured it'd go from a niche thing to a competitive advantage to a requirement over the space of about 10 years. And I think we're about halfway through that journey now. So we actually are joined today by Camila Moir. Camila, thanks so much for coming on board.
Hello.
How good's that intro?
Thanks for having me. That was really good. That was so good. Good job.
Thank you. It's my favorite part of the whole stream, to be honest.
Oh, that's awesome.
So how's your day been? How's quarantine treating you?
Not bad at all. Just trying to keep myself busy. Getting restless a little bit, but you know what? At home workout, punch it out and it'll be good.
So I've got this question for people I'm talking to at the moment. What's one thing you have done this week that made you happy?
Oh my goodness. I got an iPad today, so that's one thing that made me happy. I'm excited to start sketching a little bit more. I used to use this Wacom tablet, which was a little bit weird to like look at the screen and draw on the other, like with my hand. So now iPad, super excited to use it.
Awesome. The iPad Pro?
No, I got the Air, but eventually probably will upgrade. But the Air will do for now.
Work your way up. All those like digital tablets, such a great way to connect that like sort of that creative aspect of sketching and drawing with then making it more persistent and digital. So okay,
100%.
This is my first time streaming one of these conversations, and I've had similar chats before, and I thought it could be useful to sort of expose my thinking and give people a bit of an insight into how it might feel if they want to say make the jump, even to UX and understanding it. So I'll go through a few questions with you that'll help me understand a bit better about where you're up to, and then we can have a bit of a chat about my experiences going from traditional, we'll call it 2D media to immersive spatial media. So Camila, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? What brings you here?
Yeah, so I recently made the transition into UX. I went to uni actually to study science. I realized that wasn't for me at all. And it was what my parents wanted me to do. So I quit and I decided to take a gap year. So during my gap year, I actually started my own company and did photography and graphic design for people. And I was like, oh yeah, I can kind of pursue that as a real career. So I'm originally from Perth, and I moved over to Melbourne and pivoted my career into I studied media in RMIT. So while that's happening, I actually got a job in a startup called Delicio, which basically allowed me to experience like the digital media world and marketing. And in that part of my task was to improve the website. And I didn't know anything about it. That's the beauty of startups. You just have to figure it out. So from there, I actually did some research onto how to improve the website, and I stumbled across UX. And I fell in love with the whole process of it and the idea that it's not about using what I think subjectively is a good design, but you actually get proof or like actually get validation from people that it's actually a good design and it will function well. So that's what I like about it. And I decided to take it seriously. Took a 10-week course in Academy XI, and now I'm here. In terms of like immersive experience, I have been just playing around with making some prototypes on. I saw that on Spark AR and Snapchat. What was it called again? Lens Studio. Just playing around with augmented reality, and I fell in love with that space. Was gonna try. I was trying. I'm trying mix UX.
All right, so we have a little technical difficulty. Classic. Let me do this. Okay, and let me do this. Hey, sorry, Camilla. Did you? I just had you drop out for a second there, so I just put up the
Yeah,
back in
back in 5.
Yeah, how's your
Good.
connection there?
I was fine until like the last maybe 20 seconds, and you just got stuck.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I've got. I think. Is there a spot where you might get a little bit better Wi-Fi? Possibly. We might want to swap over.
give me a second. I'm just gonna let me figure something out. Hold on 1 second.
This. Okay, we're back. Thanks very much, everybody. Sorry about that. I have once again spilt coffee on the router. Not really. That's just my workshopping a bit for when my internet crashes. So tell us a bit about the Spark AR work you did. What were you exploring with it?
Well, I honestly was just interested. I saw a few of my friends started making filters on Instagram and Snapchat, and I was like, oh, what is this? So I decided to just try it out. But I just made filters. Really, it's as simple as that on AR filters. Just try to mess my face up a little bit with some makeup or interesting accessories. And I from there fell in love with that and realized that there's actually a lot of use, um, not just like fancy art on your face, but it could be an education tool or it could be something that really helps people. So I just wonder if there's a way to mix UX and AR together.
What about I guess as a career path and as an industry, what about XR specifically? Like, were you drawn to? What's brought you here in that regard?
Yeah. Definitely I'm just generally interested in anything that's emerging technology. That's what everyone says, but I I don't know. It's just the idea that there could be, you can just insert something into your life. Like it's not there, but it's still there. The idea that it's, you know, you can just inject anything into your life. That's just very, very interesting to me.
Sure. And what tell me a bit about the business you started and your experiences there with starting a business specifically.
Yeah. I was honestly really naive, and that was my first business ever. Um, I just really love photography at that point, and I saw that there was a need in my services, and also graphic design. That was something else I did for fun, honestly. And when there was a need and I needed the money, I just decided to make it official. And I'm the kind of person that's like, oh, if I want to do something, I better go all out, not just make it something little. So I immersed myself, tried to like learn how to actually run a business, and I did it for a couple of years and decided to stop it when I needed to pivot and take my next role a little bit more seriously, which was Delicious.
Yeah. So what were you doing at Delicious? Tell us a bit more about that.
Have you heard of Delicious?
Well,
actually,
have
you?
Let's do. Hang on, I'll go back. Move down. All right, can we just cut that there? Thank you. We'll be back after the break. That's a joke. There's no one else here. Hang on. I always have these big dreams of like setting up the. Let's just move to the bottom. I'm moving the wrong thing. All right. I'm like as we're talking, I'm like rearranging the view.
That's all right.
Up next, I have. Make sure you stick around for our next segment. Sam and his dad. It's my dad's. Me and Dad have the best chats about everything. So, all right, this is.
I saw a little bit of that.
Yeah, well, that was like kind of what. Hey, we've got Danny Remy here. Dan Remy.
Yay!
Oh, it's Dan. Hey man, how you going, buddy?
Dad.
All right. We got a third guest, a third member of the triumvirate. Okay, so now I'm just going to. We can delete that. Turn off the Fireside. So tell us about, while I'm bringing Delicious up, I'm actually bringing him on the screen. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing there.
Yeah. So have you heard of Delicious at all?
Name rings a bell, but I could be just doing one of those false memory things.
I think the founder of Fourier actually knows the founder of Delicious.
Oh,
I think
sure,
it's
okay.
through. Yeah, but anyway, side story that one. But yes, when I was there, I honestly I started off as a content creator, just making transition from like my photography business into actually being an in-house photographer and videographer. So I made content like, those tasty videos where you shoot from top down and you make food videos. That was basically what I was doing.
Cool.
But so Delicious is a company that sells seasonings, vegan seasonings, and their main product is the bacon seasoning. So it makes everything taste like bacon. You guys should go try it if you like it. But it was a really interesting product. I had a blast working there. Making lots of experimenting with different recipes. So I came up with all these recipes, cooked with them, and just did a lot of content there. But yeah, eventually there was a need for me to do extra roles. So like content. So I went from content creation to like a more creative director role. So producing, like organizing a team and producing campaigns, to like organizing the website and improving that. So yeah, a bunch of stuff. A startup is like that when when it's just a tiny team, but like you have to know how to do everything.
Sure,
so.
100%.
Yeah.
I feel that like I had a really similar journey with my background. I can talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I have one question: is how is Delicious spelt?
So delicious without the S.
Delicious.
Delicio.
Without the S at the end?
So DELICIOU.
CIOU, alright. Delicious bacon seasoning. Alright, well I took way too long. I was hoping I could like pan to this as we were talking. I'm still working on it. Hang on, but let's pretend. Alright, there we go. Oh, you can't see it. I turned off my camera. Hang on,
I can't see it.
I'll give you a little peek. Look at that.
Oh yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So this is their newest product. It's minced chicken, but it's dried, and when you add water into it and fry it, it's chicken.
Yum. This looks good. Yeah, we have this at work actually. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So that was definitely not worth the juice. Was not worth the squeeze there. But we'll go back to the normal view. But I can pan back to that later. So okay, in terms of XR, like transitioning from like UX to XR. And I don't think it's probably not fair for you to say, you know, I did science and then I studied UX at this course, and then I now want to, you know, do this other thing or whatever. It's very much that you've been a digital content producer working with just like traditional media, and like you happen to have expanded, you know, done that UX capacity. But if you're already working across like branded experiences, multi-channel experiences, you already have been a UX designer in the sense that you've been like managing like brand experiences and journeys and things like that as well. So I think that's probably my first tip is like, you're not a fresh UX graduate, you're a 4-year deep digital freelancer, you know?
I definitely did not realize that until I talked to Dan Remy, who's in the audience, who made me realize that I kind of touched on UX in my previous job. But yes, I didn't. I honestly, it took me a while to realize that.
And then in that same context, it won't be that you do a VR course to be a VR person. It's like, well, you're a digital, you know, producer. You've worked with 2D, 3D, things like that as well. So just, I think that as you're like getting into this industry, and like, we'll talk about it a little bit more, I guess, but, you know, you'll possibly or probably end up working in different blends of digital production roles for different, you know, startups and traditional businesses, and probably doing your own freelance work and things like that, is to be able to draw a cogent golden thread through it all, so that each thing supports the other thing and builds that narrative. It's nothing that's not true. It's just contextualizing everything with one overarching story, basically, because it makes it a lot easier for people to process. It's not like, oh, here's one segment. Okay, so it's photos, and then it's bacon seasoning. It's like, well, you know, content, digital production, storytelling, you know, basis in photography, working with mixed media, blah, 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 blah. It's all the same thing. It's all storytelling, essentially. It's just like the different media types as you get to understand them.
You're helping me sell me. I love it.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's not about because like, you know, being an XR person in 5 years' time, like, won't mean anything. It's like saying you're an internet person. It'll just be another technology stack that will become more common. It's like saying I'm an iPhone expert or something like that. So in that regard, what's your long play? Forget about the media, or even, I guess, like, you can contextualize it, like anchor it in XR because you're just interested in it. But what's your long-term vision? What do you want out of your career?
I honestly just want to make an impact in someone's life, you know. Going into UX, my goal is to always just help people, and my goal for my entire career, even from science, is to help someone in any aspect of their life. So yeah, in the long term, I just want to make an impact, really. Just depends. It doesn't matter what field I get into, as long as I help someone.
Sure.
I think XR definitely is a really good tool and opportunity in the future, especially. So yeah, I feel like that could be a good zone, and I'm generally interested in it, so I feel like I can go into that direction.
Sure. How can you see XR helping people?
I honestly haven't really that's a great question. I'll have to go away and think about it, but I just know, you know, being immersed into another environment while you're in this environment, that could be there's a lot of opportunities there, because you can insert anything. The idea that you can insert anything into your space is just mind-blowing to me. So 100%. I think there's opportunity there. Yeah.
I think at Fourier, one thing we have discovered, well, not discovered, but one thing that we were believers in and have had this idea reinforced is that XR is this massive tool for behavioral change, because it's super high impact, it's super high bandwidth. It makes a real impression on people. We can talk a little bit about that as well, but it is a really powerful tool for making an impact. And then when you can make an impact with the right message, you can make significant change as well. So you want to make an impact. What do you think your day looks like in 5 years' time working at an XR studio, if you know what I mean? What kind of stuff do you imagine yourself doing? Things like that.
I just, like, big picture wise, I can just see myself kind of finding existing problems and trying to solve them using UX XR kind of the tools that we have. That's just a general kind of picture I can see, just solving real problems in the world.
Sure. And I think that's
Yeah.
where, as you um, just keep doing what you're doing, which is, meeting with, clients or businesses or your own product, identifying problems and solving them, as you learn about the VR and XR tool set, you can just incorporate those capabilities into your designs. So what's really important is developing your design practice and also coming up with a design language that can reflect, XR experience design as well as 2D, because, I mostly plan, installations and apps and things like that, but I do need to think about how, people are onboarded, the way that the flow goes through a museum, or the way that people use the website, for example. So it's all an extension of it.
Yeah, that sounds like a service design thing, because you have to think about it in the whole big picture service, from onboarding to like the end.
100%. The number of times I've like walked past like a talk from the product or the UX design at Academy XI. Well, if I'm in for a course, hey, this is my she's the band. She plays this off. And I'm always like, ooh, maybe I should know some of this stuff. But I think a lot of the time it's just about a certain mindset of being able to think things through from start to finish and think about the user generally. I personally don't have like traditional UX experience. I actually had a really similar journey to you, where I moved through different types of different digital media and things like that. So maybe I'll tell you a little bit about my experience.
Yes, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, sure, 100%. So camera 2. I actually worked at Delisio. No, that's my joke. All right.
Well, I think at one point Fourier and Delisio was in the same startup hub situation.
Yeah.
I think I worked with Fourier team before at one point.
All right, hang on. I got to do the transition. All right, you can. I guess you do need to see my slides. So there we go. That's fine. Yeah, I put a slideshow together.
There you go.
I'm always one thing.
Oh, a slideshow!
Always be ready to put together. Always have a slideshow in your back pocket. Always be ready to do a 5-minute prezzo.
I'm gonna learn from you. I'm gonna take that.
Okay, so I actually, so I'm a law graduate, which is an interesting little fact about me. And I, while I was finishing law, I got really into Bitcoin on Reddit. It's very strange. And at the same time, I was just getting really into like the internet and digital and tech and content creation, all that kind of stuff that you were talking about. That just, I just love technology. I loved digital media, and I had picked up work. I learned how to use AdWords, and I got really into like, well, actually what happened was I worked at a call center. I worked at a call center when I was like early 20s, and then I worked at a call center with a website. And then at the website, it was like a startup. It was the first startup I worked at. It was called Compare Broadband. It's like one of those comparison sites. It was a really small team. And so the CEO was just like, look, you can pretty much learn whatever you want if you can do it for me. And I was like, all right. So I learned AdWords. I learned about running digital campaigns. I learned all that kind of stuff. And I started, and this is something that I think will be really critical for you to learn the skill of early on is, or continue the skill of, because you've already done it, if you've done that digital photography stuff, is that idea of like business building and the ability to present yourself as a business and present your work in a coherent way so that it's extensible enough that you can find new clients and put together work, and you can sort of work under the royal we. Like, when I was younger, it was like I kind of tried to make it seem like it was bigger than it was, which you don't have to do either. But I started freelancing, doing like the AdWords, things like that, as a way to help me out as I was finishing uni. And what are these? I pulled this out. So this was like a bunch of Reddit posts from when I was getting really into Bitcoin as an interesting technology. And I'm glad let's not go into that conversation. But I ended up joining a startup called CoinJar as their digital marketing person. So as their sort of everything person, really. Like my speciality was, what was it? AdWords just happened to be, but then it was that same thing. If you just have to learn about like the digital pipeline, you have to learn about copywriting and all that kind of stuff as well.
High five. Similar journey there.
Yeah, 100%. And I've talked to a lot of people in the same boat because we're all sort of like these, you know, all coming through these industries as they're still super nascent. There's not like 10 years ago when you wanted to get into print media or whatever, where it was like, oh, you do this and you do that. You just sort of like, all these businesses are like developing and these new roles are developing. Like the idea of a creative director now compared to say 10 or 20 years ago, that's like completely different jobs. So from there, I ended up, I actually ended up making an AR app called the Bitcoin Treasure Hunt. Because I just got really into, you know, I was just so into technology and computers and storytelling and that blend between them. And that ended up getting me promoted to like marketing manager because Asher really liked it. I run a bunch of campaigns. This on the far right here, or maybe left above your head, is from our install where I tried VR properly for the first time with the, you know, the zero latency guys. Maybe it's that like the guys that have this big warehouse where it's like free roam virtual reality shoot 'em up situation.
Right.
So
yeah,
this is when they were like 2 or 3 people, and I went and tried their stuff out for the first time and was like, this is crazy. And I was like, how do you do this? And they're like, oh, we get it off these. I think the thing that triggered it for me was they were like, oh, we got these zombies off the asset store. And I was like, you can just buy zombies and stick them in a game? Like, this is crazy. And so I just got really into it. And then at the same time, this was like early days of Bitcoin. The market like crashed out and like things weren't going that well. But at that stage, I'd learned a lot about, I'd learned a lot about freelancing and like kind of faking it till you make it early on. And then working at CoinJar, I like learned a lot more about like good functional fundamentals of like delivering, you know, digital experiences and things like that. At that stage, I also got really into Unity and I got really into playing around in VR. And I was able to basically step out of that, get regular clients. And I did have to do, and I say this to a lot of people, is that early on, you'll have to do a blend of freelancing for regular clients and then find ways to sort of like either phase in virtual reality experiences or at the same time be able to present to potential new clients like, hey, let's try virtual reality as a campaign. So really the way you look at it is you're a digital production studio, one person digital production studio at the moment. You know, you can do all this traditional media, but you're also experimenting with 3D and things like that as well. These are just some photos. This is actually a presentation from when I went and talked to CoinJar like a couple of weeks ago, actually. So
that's cool.
Some of it's a bit niche, like that's my dog and things like that.
What a cutie.
So yeah, essentially like the way there's a few slides that are missing there. I figured out a way to present myself as essentially like a digital production studio. My focus was actually copywriting. That was like my main speciality. And like production, creative lead, putting together jobs. And I'd basically always treat everyone with this same like sales pipeline basically of you'd get together and have a chat about, you know, hey, we're this, we do these kind of things. You sort of exude this ambient skill set that like is very easy to bring up in conversations. And then you say, hey, let's, you know, cool, that sounds like something we could work on. Let's get together and have a chat and do what I call a discovery, where you go and you talk to them, much like I just spoke to you about, you know, your goals and what they're trying to achieve. Then get really good at putting together concepts and then coming back and pitching those concepts essentially. So yeah, that was my main skill and speciality that meant that I could stay afloat and stay alive, especially when things were really lean. There wasn't like VR and AR work back then. But I always had the same process of like, what do you need? Okay, what makes you tick? What are you trying to achieve? Go away and then come back and essentially design solutions and then present them. And then I just applied that to my VR and my AR work. And from there, I also partnered with a more technical person. And the key to it is that I would have a group of people that I could lean on, designers, developers. None of them were necessarily like, in the end, I ended up partnering with the developer. And we worked mostly together. Now we both work at Fourier. But basically, you're the brains of the outfit in terms of the concept and the creative. You talk to the client, you come up with some ideas, and then you put together a job, you put together quotes, you figure it all out with like the team that you want to work with. And then you come back and your superpower is the ability to put together these jobs and pitch them essentially. And I did that for a few years, and we made, hang on, let's see, I'll show you a few things. So we were called Tesseract. I just recently took the website down because I was like, this is stupid. It doesn't need to be there anymore. Let's see if I can find it. YouTube. What would I Google to find it? Tesseract. YouTube. 2000. Showreel maybe. Here we go. So this is some of the stuff we put together. It's super basic and it's kind of fun and silly. But I treated everything like a brand job. Do you know what I mean? I'd always do like big brand concepts. I'd always do tons of UX flows, and I had a really good. I built on my IP as like a creative freelancer and developed a workflow. But then the output was just VR stuff. And at this stage, I wasn't even a really good VR developer. I was just kind of like smushing stuff together and seeing what would happen. And so I think that really set us apart and gave us an advantage early on when there wasn't, it was all just kind of like tech demos and things like that. So, and all the stuff here, it's relatively basic. It's pretty cool, actually. Move the little trolley around.
This does not look basic, like from this point of view.
Yeah, true. I guess this is pretty good. But, at the same time, I've been building my practice, like my skill sets around VR development for a few years as well. But what really, what I really brought to the table was my ability to plan and design like the user flows and experiences, bring in that element of branding and cohesion, that visual identity, things like that. So, and I didn't know how to do it. I just was like, well, if I'm going to design a VR experience, where would I start? And I'm like, well, I guess I would start the same way I would start if I was designing a website. What's the, what's the mood board that I want to have, things like that as well. So I think you'd find that...
You're thinking holistically, which I love.
100%. And like the thing is that for a long time, it was like I had this set of skills around like VR design and development. And then I had this set of skills around branding and marketing and like, I guess, agency work. And it took a while for them to merge. And I had to basically develop both concurrently. But at a certain point, they did start to blend a lot. And that's where they started to amplify each other a lot as well. So it was a long journey. And that was the other thing I will say to everyone when they're doing the course, is this is a long journey because you are like, you're going to have to do a lot of work and stick to it for quite a long time to make it last. And you have to keep experimenting and doing things like that as well. So now we are Fourier. And I'll just, so basically, and none of this was a success story. Like this was all like desperately trying to stay in the game, working 2 jobs essentially to build my skill sets and probably more importantly, build my folio around that kind of work. And like barely making rent and things like that. And then we decided to try and make our own game, essentially, me and the other guy, and pretty much just ran out of money because we were just like trying to make our own game. At this point, there wasn't that much work in the industry, and I was just like, I think we're gonna have to get jobs, man. Like this is like not working. It did work in the sense that that whole time I was running those concurrent skill and brand development of like, hey, I can do this stuff and people know that I can do this stuff. But the industry wasn't really at the point where it is now, even where there's much demand. So I teamed up with Fourier. I met the team, me and my partner, jumped on board with them and we made ShareVox. So we were still both contractors. So these were our last client essentially, was Fourier. And I think it was always kind of understood that if we did well, they would give us a job, where we, it was basically this app that lets you paint voxels in space, but it was like multiplayer and you could like anchor them to the space. So this was like early days of like shared AR. And, once again, I just approached this like I would approach any like digital production job. I did mood boards, I did user flows, and I mocked it up. And that's what I brought to the table. Like I did work as a developer, but in many ways, me working as a developer on these jobs, it was great for me. Like that's I also do really like the technical stuff, but and at the stage, there was so few people that could do it and so little demand that we all kind of had to wear multiple hats. But what I'm actually trying to learn to do is step away from that and amplify my design skills and get better at that.
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, it's like, well, we don't need a jack of all trades. We need really good XR designers that can think about everything from start to finish as well. So, I'm at my own sort of like career crux in that regard. And let's see, where we kind of ended up was Rewild, which is this big.
I love this, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
I was stalking.
Well, this was and I'll show you some like behind the scenes stuff as well. But essentially, this was like the biggest job we got at Fourier, and the first piece where it really started to become this idea that I'd started with when I joined the industry was, or like, kind of like jumped on board this kind of stuff, was that there'd be this new type of comms, this new type of user experience design that would blend between 2D, 3D, and form a part of like a broader marketing campaign. And I think more and more will form like an integral part of and the core part of like comms campaigns, as people will eventually expect their branded experiences to be 3D. Basically, they'll be surprised.
Yeah.
They'll be like, why can't I go inside this? You know what I mean? In the same way that brands had to get on board with mobile, because at a certain point they're like, I want to engage with you on my mobile, right? And yeah, so that's me. I hope that gives you like some ideas of the journey I've been on. Have you got any questions there? I've got a few like key takeaways that I would say for you, but like, what do you think you can take from that? And what questions do you want to ask me about it?
I actually had a list of questions, but you kind of attacked all of it in this PowerPoint. So good job there. I would say my main takeaway there was the idea that, we came from really similar backgrounds. And I've always seen it as, well, not always, but I recently realized it hasn't been a waste of time. But I always looked at it as, it was like in a completely different field. It was a segment of my life that didn't link to what I want to get into the future. But actually, seems like, everything's transferable. And your previous experience, back at CoinJar, just reflected my experience in Delitio, like jack of all trades, touched different things, and kind of transitioned slowly into XR. So that's comforting to hear.
So what's your first step to the XR? So here's your goal. Here's your 5 years. You're at the nexus of a team that's making an impact, and XR is a big part of that, and you're guiding the UX. So what's day one look like? What do we do tomorrow? Or let's say Monday.
I'm honestly just, my plan of attack is to talk to people in the field, just to try and understand what the field is like. So talking to you today, my main goal is to find out, what your day-to-day is like at Fourier, and like how's the work done.
Sure.
And then just trying to get an idea of how to accelerate my learnings. I'm trying to learn Unity, like self-learn. It's tough, but I'm actually genuinely interested, so I don't think it's a big thing there. But I would like to know kind of advice to see how I can accelerate my growth quickly.
Sure. Well, look, I would say you can think of Unity as maybe the Photoshop of spatial design. It's or After Effects. It's a technical skill that you do have. It takes years to master. You can do a lot with it quickly though, especially like the build pipelines. Now, if you were to get an AR or a VR device, you're like, all right, I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to learn the build pipeline. I'm going to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because you won't know. Watch my last stream. I didn't know what I was doing until the very end.
Is it the one where you did lighting?
Which
Is that
one?
what you?
The one that I just did
Today?
Yeah, just today. So, hang on, I'll do a little cut. Oh wait, no, I won't do it. All right, wait, yes I will. Because I can do
this one.
Yeah, so I didn't know what I was doing. I never know what I'm doing until I know how to do it, which takes forever. So yeah, Unity is a great skill to learn. I personally believe that it's one of those things. It's a massive hurdle to jump over to figure it out, essentially. But it is the best fun. It's my favorite thing to do. I love it there because it's like you've got you've got your hands about as close to the metal as you can get, and without being like a proper like technical person. And there's tons of like interaction layers on top of it, so you can sort of like orchestrate and sequence animations and things like that. You just have to have a good functional understanding of the little bits that you need to know to make things change from blue to red. And so you kind of to really, you know, get it, you kind of need to be able to understand all of it at a very shallow level. And that can be really intimidating at first. So I think that the first step is to like pick a tutorial series. Like the job, so I spent 50 grand in 7 years getting a law degree. And I get the most money that I earned from my like formal learning was from like a $12 200-hour Unity course that I did on the internet. Which I always tell at Academy XI, I'm like, well, you should probably do this course as well. You know what I mean? And there's probably many better ones now that you can learn the specifics to VR, because this wasn't a VR one, it was a Unity one. So 100%, like, and if you are going to develop a mastery of a skill, you need to make sure that you're spending time doing that every day, because it doesn't matter who you talk to or, you know, what ideas you have. If you're not putting those hours in, it just won't happen. And
that's true.
It is, I think, like a skill that, you know, you need to think about what your one thing is, and is it going to be Unity, or is Unity a hobby? That's something to think about. I think probably my advice would be, as a creative, as a UX person, you know, you lead through design, is something that I think is becoming more true now. You know, the designer isn't just the person you bring on to make things look nice. Often they're the person running comms between technical, business development, client, and the audience. So it's like, it's this incredibly important, but also humbling role, because a lot of the time you're just bringing in a bunch of needs and requirements and acting as the person that makes it work visually and in terms of experience. So I think that building on that thread of yourself as a business owner, and also forgetting about the big scary idea of having a business, you just need an ABN and the ability and a good, you just need a good backup. You just need a good template for your slides, and finding ways to start drawing those golden threads together into one braid, so to speak, by finding UX work generally, and building your folio out. And like my folio, I'll show you my folio now. Actually, let's have a look. It's super out of date. It's like 100 years old. But this was the folio that I got. This was you in 3 years when you've done more brand work and started building out your VR folio, where you just like slowly add less and less terrible projects to it until you can start deleting the really shit ones that you're like, oh, this is pretty embarrassing. And this is when
it's just all I have, all the shit ones.
This is still, I just like made it look good. You know, the first thing, if you want to do comms and design, the first thing you need to be able to design is people's user journey with you. You know what I mean?
That's true.
So this is my folio this is the folio that got me the job at Fourier, essentially. So I had this like split between branding, because, you know, I did branding, and I worked as a copywriter, freelancing, and I put together my own jobs and stuff like that. So let's have a look what's in here. And I was getting closer. I was like honing in on, you know, the thread of like what makes me me.
Telling your story.
And so, and this is the interesting thing. We ended up working for a VR company where I did their rebrand as well as their thing. And I didn't, you know, none of this would have worked with a plan. You know, my plan was to just keep getting jobs because I had to survive, and as much as possible try and, at the time I was really just leveraging my storytelling and writing skills. I didn't really care about them that much. Just to stay in the game, to be able to do the VR stuff pretty much, and then slowly just like get rid of the brand stuff. And then just like, you know, this was a proof of concept, that I just designed it. Do you know what I mean? And I used that in my folio. This was like paid work. This was just some of my own stuff that I did in blocks, Google Blocks. This was with Contact. This was just some of my design work. This was like this terrible idea that I ended up doing. You know, so I just like not fluffed up my folio, but I just kept doing any type of work I could, and wherever possible doing commercial work. But always presenting in this sense of like, you know, I'm this digital content producer. You know, these are my specialities, yada, yada, yada. So I think that two-prong is finding some clients basically, and finding reasons and excuses to put concept decks together to... I think the tool that you can sharpen the fastest, Unity is going to take you 5 years to get to the point where you can do the kinds of things I can do. It's going to take you 1 or 2 years to get to the point where you can make something that will sell your idea in VR, but it will take you 3 to 6 months to build a practice of designing VR and AR experiences, and just using the UX understanding that you have now, essentially. And then just guess all the VR stuff. Just slap a VR headset on the mock-up. You know what I mean? Really,
it's just a prototype anyway.
Yeah, well, it's not even a prototype. It's just a pitch deck. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
And then connecting with other people that are about the same level as you, that will go out, like, take a risk and go out on a bit of a limb in terms of, hey, let's put together this job for 20 grand. You get 5 grand. I get 5 grand. We keep 5 grand buffer, and we'll just eat noodles, or I'll do copywriting or whatever other thing you can do, photography, I guess. But then the cool thing is that because you can do photography, is you can do nice promo shots and all that kind of stuff as well. But step one is building your design practice around this kind of stuff, and finding meaningful commercial work that you can apply it to, and then faking it in the middle. So just like design, I'd say like designing VR experiences every day, documenting it really well, and building your folio is something you need to do. And then that's probably where I'd be starting, and finding some clients and getting into that headspace of, I'm a freelancer that does production, and it's not even like I did a course in VR. Like, people don't do a course in iPhones now. It's just like, hey, that sounds really cool. Let's come back next week. And I put together this proposal, and it also includes a VR activation as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. That seems like something I can start on. The other question I had for you is, maybe just talk about maybe just go into, if it's possible, maybe choose any project, but I'm really interested in the one you did with David Attenborough. Like, how did that came about, and like what was the whole process like, and how long did it take, and like who was involved? Like, maybe you can share that a little bit.
Sure, 100%. So essentially, off the back of that multiplayer AR Google Blocks thing that I showed you, we did that essentially with and for Google, kind of for free. It's spec work. A lot of this stuff, you just like do the kind of work you want to get paid for is such a good way to think about it. They were then approached by WWF because they wanted to do an AR activation to support that. They were partners in the Our Planet series, and they wanted something to support it. So they came to us with a concept, and we'd already built that relationship and those capabilities, and we're like, okay, there's going to be a big screen, there's going to be a crater. What can you do? I won't show the concept decks we used to pitch with. They're really good. I just don't know where they are. But essentially, we came back with, and this is the same principle but magnified. This is because the team at Fourier kind of had a similar journey, but where they grew from delivering a few services to doing more contract work to just to getting by. So they had this really good capability to put together concepts, essentially. So we put together this awesome concept with, like, at that point I had a really good practice for visualizations, and like I had a really good VR design language, I guess. And then they were like, yep, sounds good, you guys have killed it. They said it was the best pitch they'd ever seen. And that's what I mean, is that like it'll take you 5 years to be able to do the quality of work I can do technically, but you could just end up teaming up with someone that can already do that. In fact, I would recommend that. Save yourself a lot of headaches and kind of going half crazy. But you can probably get your visual presentation of your concepts to a pretty high quality over the next year. And at the end of the day, the thing that gets you paid is pitches. And the things that, I'm not saying that no one will give you a job off the back of what you've done at a doing some sort of VR adjacent thing, but it will be, there's a bunch of people that have already been through that journey that could do it. You could get probably a good job doing UX and digital production stuff anywhere off the back of your experience if you present it right, and then integrate some of your VR AR stuff. Like there's plenty of other pathways to that, but in terms of moving really quickly into having a folio. It's like it's up to you to be able to bring those ideas to life.
Yeah.
So, you know, we got the job and we killed it because we'd all been pitching VR concepts for 5 years, you know, and also doing them. Then I flew to Singapore with the team to do this massive workshop where I did all that kind of UX stuff. Like, hey, what's, you know, what kind of moments do we want to hit? What type of interactions do we want people to have? What's the message? It all came down to that branding thing. It's like, you know, what impact do we want to have on the users?
Yeah.
Then I went away and I've now built up my VR practice so that, you know, I know I've got my own like skills around, you know, defining asset types because, you know, you need to understand the 3D asset, like, you know, content requirements and asset requirements and things like that. I'm just like reading off the deck here, but what it really came down to was like really good storyboarding, where just being able to break down all the, you know, the different moments and sequence them out and just think things through at a really granular level, which most people can do if pressed, but also having my own practice of being able to communicate them really effectively. So, you know, I've got my own design language. I'm really good with Illustrator, but I wasn't 2 years ago. I was just like, I need a way to communicate like outside of wireframes. You know, I've done so many wireframes and I realized that like, with AR and VR is that that you need to show people relative to the content to be able to understand it and think it through meaningfully. You need to think about what happens when they walk over here and walk over there and what's behind that kind of thing. And so that was my like core role, was acting as, you know, I'd work together with like the script writers and the creative team, and then work together with the technical team to say like, all right, what's possible, what's not possible, and then put these decks together, and then you know, this would then go back to the client, and then the client. And once again, like, it's just about having a design practice. It doesn't really matter that it's VR or AR. And that's where it comes down to just doing the work, essentially. And when no one's paying you, just keep doing it until someone does. And be your own business owner in that regard. Just find someone to give you $1,000 to do something. Like, that's a good starting point. Yeah, so that was essentially my role. But then I also, check that out. It's sick. I like that. That's
so freaking cool.
Though I did learn that like the more you draw, the more work you have to do later to build it. So my current like storyboards are like four long, and I'm like, look, this is gonna take like half a year, guys. Come on. Like we worked the last few days before we left Australia. I did some days where like I worked till dawn. Because I then was on the technical team and building it with them and things like that as well, which isn't something you have to be able to do. In fact, at a certain point, these two roles are at odds, because if you're constantly thinking about the practicalities of building it, you're going to be less creative. Though it does help to understand the tools, so you can speak the language and understand, you know, what a 3D asset is versus an animation and all that kind of stuff as well. So, yeah, look, I think like if you go here versus like, let me see if I can find one of my early designs. To be honest, they're all pretty good. No, I'm joking. Well, I'm not joking, but
I think it's pretty good. So there you go.
See if I can find like, here we go. Like, this is actually pretty good too. Like, this is one of my first storyboard pitches. You know what I mean? In fact, this was my first professional storyboard pitch. It's in a Google Doc. You know, here's my mood board in like bullet pointed whatever. You know, it's all right, but like the drawings are fine. Like I know how to draw. Like anyone can draw. In fact, if anything, the drawings are better. But I learned that if you try and do all these good drawings, like this took like 3 weeks to just do like. Do you know what I mean? Oh, so this is, I don't know if you remember. This is the shot from.
That's the shot. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, right?
Reminds me of that Star Trek game on Xbox.
Yeah, well, this is.
Have you played that one?
No, I haven't played. I know the one you're talking about. The one sad thing is that I like never play any games or do anything apart from build VR. So this was called Backyard Rockets, where you had to like launch from. This was all to showcase the Maestro glove. And you know, I got this off the back of, you know, I'd been learning Unity, I'd been doing whatever, and then these guys tweeted like, "Hey, does anyone know blah blah blah?" And so I made this super demo experience. It was like so hacky. Like it looks good. That's the thing. I know how to make stuff look good. So I made this for them, and then you just always got to be ready to like pitch and close like a fucking pro, basically. Even when you don't, I had no idea. I was like, how the fuck am I gonna do this?
That's just business minded. Love it.
Yeah, and then you just figure it out.
Yeah.
And so, but like you can see here, like the progress from something like this. Like look at this. The bloody.
It's cute.
It's cute, but it's like it all comes down to like that essential like thinking things through, storytelling, whatever. But then building up like your. In many ways, this is less visually appealing or whatever, but it's like this is like functional. Fundamentally, at this point, I've got my practice down pat, and I can just smash these out. I think I did this in like 3 days, like the first pass of it. You know what I mean? Because it's just like you just do it enough.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so that's it. That's the journey, and it's not a journey of like, oh hey, here's how you go get a job at Microsoft doing whatever. And if you did go get a Microsoft doing whatever now, you'd probably end up just doing more. Like it'd be fine, and there's jobs out there and stuff like that. But like if you can develop, however you do it, develop your practice of putting together concepts, pitching them, getting devs, designers, and business people on board, like you're unstoppable essentially. But it starts with doing the work every day. Interesting book to read is this book called The One Thing. It's kind of it's a bit of a tacky book in the way that the guy speaks, but he has this idea that you just like figure out what your long-term goal is, whatever that is. And for you, it's like impact with XR, yada, yada, yada. And then figure out every day what the most important thing you can do to work towards that is, and make sure that's the first thing you do for the first 4 or 5 hours of the day. And then do all your emails and kind of, I got to pay my bills, that kind of stuff. Do all that at the end of the day. So figuring out what that is for you as a starting point is a good one. And I think shifting your thinking so that you're, okay, I'm going to, the next time I'm talking to someone, I'm talking as a content producer. You've already got your folio and your camilamoy.com, whatever, all set up with like, just whatever work you've done, just slap it all up there and just call yourself a digital producer or whatever. With your, film and document your AR filters, like that'll put you ahead of like 1,000 people. I've never actually talked to anyone in this role that's made anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's awesome. And that's it. All these tools,
that's good.
Check out Torch AR is another like, AR prototyping tool, things like that. And Unity. And then just like, you can slowly, as you get more work, just filter off the bad jobs, like some of these ones on my folio. So my folio, it's years old, right? Like this, what is this here? This, Mr. Cuties vs. Sooties one. It's like, I love it, but it's like terrible. So this was like, when I was still like, fuck, I need to fluff this folio up. This was like a Unity tutorial that I did. And then I made my own assets in Google Blocks because I was just like jamming on it. Do you know what I mean? And then I just like, I just chucked it in there because I was like, I've only done 3 things. Let's see if I can just put this in there.
It looks complete. So that's a win.
Well, that's because I know that's because I work in marketing in the past. I know how to make stuff look good. But like, in fact, it's pretty cool.
The whole.
Check it out. You like plant the toaster. But this is all just a Unity tutorial. Like, and this was the Bitcoin treasure hunt AR thing that was like the first thing I did ever.
That is so cool.
So buggy. This was all just like pirated 3D assets from the App Store. But you just get it together. You just put stuff together, put yourself out there. So practice, figure out what that practice is. Presentation, think about how you present to the world and present the work you've done, and then pitch.
Yeah. Cool. Fake it till you make it. That's another one.
Pretty much, as long as you're making it. As
long as I'm comfortable being uncomfortable making it.
100%.
Yeah.
So next time we're going to talk is when you say, Sam, I've got someone that I think I could pitch a VR experience for. And I want to chat with you beforehand, and then we'll talk about, this doesn't have to be a stream. I think that's a different conversation. Going into it in the sense of like, I'm doing a discovery so I can get prepared to put a concept together. And if you hit that mark, I'll help you with the next bit. Cool?
Sounds great. I would love that.
Awesome.
I think we covered everything that I have question wise here. But thank you so much for your time.
No problem.
This was fun.
Yeah, cool. No, that's great. Well, hopefully we can, depending on where you get up to, because it's really up to you, is maybe we can have you back on the Samuel Tate experience. or have a coffee in
Yeah.
real life if they reopen the economy at some stage.
Finally. Oh man. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think it will.
We'll see.
It's gotta
That
be-
cluster kind of fucked it up, but it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not leaving until Christmas.
Oh no.
Yeah, so like hit me up if you've got I would say put together your current designs and your folio, give me a look, and maybe start putting together your own concept doc of like a pitch, like integrating some of that UX practice you've done into a VR concept doc, put that on your folio as well.
Yeah.
And find one person this month that you can do a discovery with, if that makes sense, that you can do a needs analysis with in the way that you would with a client, you know what I mean? But I think like don't be too stressed about getting the client straight away, because I think that you could probably spend a bit of time not so much doing extra work, but finding the right way to present the work you've done, and maybe fluffing it up a little bit here and there. But the thing is, you want to already be, from this point on, I'm CamilaMoy.com and I'm ready to build you a VR experience,
Okay.
Cool.
Let me aim for that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Cool. All right.
Cool.
Well,
hopefully the next time I see you is with coffee.
Yeah.
With real life coffee. But yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I think I've got a bunch of things that I can action on. So I'm definitely going to work on that.
Well, I would say off the one thing is pick the first most important one and do that. And don't stop until it's done.
Yeah, agreed.
All right.
Okay.
So what's the top thing? What are you going to do first?
I'm just going to choose a Unity tutorial and
yeah.
we'll see what I want to build. Or like think about what I'm actually interested in and like build that first, learn it, and then see what my next step is after that, I would say.
Cool. All right.
Would you agree?
Let's say I would start doing a Unity tutorial every day, 100%. But I think the best thing you could probably do is start putting together your folio as a digital producer and rethinking the way you present, because that opportunity, whatever it is, the industry is different to where it was for me 2 years ago. That opportunity to present in the right way, to present your digital work in the past and your AR work now, might pop up next week.
That's true.
You might have that chance
so
to have that coffee. And then as you start doing more AR work and concept work, you can just add it to that folio. And it's not this like, I'll share it when the folio is ready.
Yeah, I do have that mindset of like, I'll wait until it's ready. I do have a folio on, but it's mainly UX at the moment.
That's fine.
I kind of want to combine that.
Yeah, I think figuring that out, like the brand presence, to incorporate a bit of that kind of stuff, and you'll be sweet. But I definitely agree, like, especially if you've got some spare time because of the quarantine and everything like that, doing, say like an hour or two of tutorials every morning, or even, 4 hours of tutorials every morning. Honestly, if you did 4 hours of tutorials every morning, you would like skip me by like 3 years. Because I just didn't do any tutorials for years. I was just like guessing how to do everything and just smushing everything together. And I was like, maybe I should learn something. So yeah, 100%. And there's so many good tools with Unity as well. So keep me posted.
Yeah.
Right?
100%. Thank you so much for your time. I'm definitely going to be in touch with you.
Yeah, cool. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Yes. Thanks. Bye.
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 Hang on. Wait. How do we... All right. So that's pretty cool. That was my first interview. Oh, this camera's so dark. Why is it so dark? Something's not right with it. That was cool. Da-da-da-da-da. Yep, cool. Just checking my microphone was actually on. I'm actually streaming, not imagining it. Okay, up next I'm going to have my dad. Probably. Let's find out. So, how do I go to my break view? Break view.
Go, here we go. Good. I'll turn the phone off. See, Tone's never zoomed yet, so we're actually doing Tone a big favour. Because I said, yeah. Well, no. We'll make it.
And what are we here to learn about today, Mr. Gowdy?
Doctor, for God's sake.
Mister.
Oh, I was talking to
Doctor,
Sam.
he's
Oh,
the
that's
mister.
right. I get to set the topic re-emerging.
And we've got a worldwide audience.
Yeah, 3 people.
Excellent. Can you turn the radio down?
You can, you know that.
No, it's not.
It's an object volume written up. I want. Not yet. I've still got the backing 5. Now you're live.
There we go.
Oh, you look like you're in a little home studio or something.
Okay. We're
how did
live.
backdrop?
We're
No,
live.
you don't. That
How's
is
that? Look, the one thing I do need is better lighting. But guys, could we get quiet on the set? We're just kicking our intro. Okay. Yep. We're gonna be live. We're gonna be live in 3, 2. Okay, thank you very much. We're back. That was an excellent fireside chat with Camila Moi, aspirational VR designer, and has discovered that she is already a UX experienced digital producer. So we helped draw that golden thread between digital production and VR. Up next, we have Dr. Gowdy, who is going to take a bit of time out of his busy birthday schedule. Dad, your face is very overexposed there. You want to tilt the camera up?
Oh yeah, I'm in the direct sun because I'm in the backyard studio.
Just keep that frame going.
Here's there's
all right.
tone.
So we're just let's fade in. All right. So we've got Dr. Douglas Gowdy and Sensei Tony Squires, fresh from Queensland. All right, guys, we've got a direct feed from Queensland. How are things going up in the sunny? What do you got? What are they called? The honey state?
We call it North Queensland.
Honey, yum.
The honey
North
state.
Queensland.
Golden and
Good
sticky.
It was raining yesterday. It's cold and windy now. It's lovely.
He's just lying. It was beautiful yesterday and it's perfect today. And I went for a kayak ride in the sea yesterday morning and the sea dumped me.
So what's driving you to kayak at the moment? What gets you out on the waves?
The kayak, just, that along that Palarenda beach there back toward Rose Bay, I used to take you there when you were a very young child. And we'd stare out over the waves there. Well, just looking across to Magnetic Island in the foreground and the lovely tropical waters and all things like that, just beautiful. So it's mainly for the visuals and the sense of deep physical experience of going out through the waves and not getting dumped.
But you got dumped. What went wrong?
I went in up to my armpits.
What went wrong?
I fought the waves and the waves won.
So
but that's not why we've got our worldwide audience, Sam. It is to think that during this time where we have all paused globally, us the upstart species, us the species that since the last ice age, wherever there was plants or animals to harness so that we could overwinter in one spot with enough local food ongoing, we could then start building structures more permanent and settling down in one spot for more than seasonal or a year or two at best, and make the beginnings of what we're still aspiring to do, which is sustainable urban settlements.
And so would you say that in terms of that process, we're still going? We need to keep moving forward, or are we settling, or what's the next step there?
My reading is this, that in terms of the embodied energy taken to make up a modern urban setting, the amount of concrete that you need to go through the whole processes from the earth outward, to the behaviour of making the lime and carrying the wet liquid rock, as it were, the concrete, the cement, all the embodied energy of the building all of the roads, of building all of the infrastructure for all of the electric wires and all of this fabulous telecommunications, which we're currently reaching an audience of, count them on one finger.
We've actually got 2 viewers at the moment, which is a kind of a new record. I know what the people like.
So proud. And one of them's Tony.
No, actually, if you count Tony, we've got a real... Tony, you're like part of the studio audience here. Hang on. All right, we're bringing in Tony Vision.
Studio audience. Yeah, there we are.
There we go. Wait. I've got a wide angle as well. Camera 1, camera 2. Look,
he's also a participant.
Look, you're either both in the shot or one of you is. Come on, Tony, squeeze in.
Tone, step up. You talk about how you see more sustainable from today onward as we emerge out of the COVID time to stop and think and decide what our values are.
Was that a question?
I think the ongoing values that are inherent in people are what you return to at a time when you have less distractions. So it's a good opportunity to assess the basis of action. We run a program, and normally we don't change our program, but sometimes the programming gets changed. That's a meta-programming method. There are meta-programming substances too.
This is the equivalent of dumping a hero grade of LSD into everyone's water supply.
Yeah, that's the potential of the line of it with changed outcomes. So, but we need to determine which way we're going to go. You know, most of us are going to vote to go to the wrestling, and some of us are going to be, you know, looking at, like Dougie might say, you know, biological priorities, physical reality. Yeah.
So I'll put a question to you guys, because I'm I don't know, a medium optimist, and I definitely had those thoughts, both in the frame or one of you in the frame. Just squeeze in, step back, stand back a bit, get in the middle. Come on, Tones. You guys make, and then forward 1 foot. There we go. That's the stuff. So I'm trying to. I think like you do the maths, and you're like, okay, cool. What you guys are saying is it makes people tap into their essential. We're good. Hang on, we're good. We're coming in live. We're coming in live from Queensland. All right, that was just a warm up, guys. Don't worry. No, I'm kidding. No, we're live. North Queensland. Sorry.
And a lounge room in Melbourne.
They're getting to secede. They're getting ready to secede up there, I reckon.
So welcome everybody. You may be able to hear a whippersnapper in the background. You can actually see blue sky behind me up past the tarpaulin, because we're in my indoor-outdoor lounge room here, deliberating in an urban environment. More than half of the humans on the planet are now urbanites, and likely is that any viewers or listeners are, you know, statistically more likely to be in suburbia. So how do we make suburbia better for us all in the long term, given that for the majority of us by choice? It's where we want to live. We actually like settling down with a bit of space, bit of privacy. What are our basic needs besides the obvious ones? And we like communication. We like to travel around. We like to exchange information. And for me, this post-COVID time will be, for the first time, the whole planet as a species has stopped all at once and had a chance to think. The countries that have behaved on a knowledge base and gone, what are the medical people who actually understand epidemiology and so on? Let's use knowledge to make decisions for best outcomes. And we've done this very well in Australia. We've had, since Federation, the most cooperation of Federation of states and territories into our Australian Commonwealth. It's starting now to function as a unit, perhaps properly for the first time. That's a great outcome. Will we look to a more sustainable urban behaviour and patterns afterward? Yes, we'll have a lot more screen time like now, and we'll have a lot less of driving around or flying around to have myriad meetings and so on. A lot of our transport stuff will change. We'll learn to value some rubbishy money items a lot less, and value some interpersonal acts of generosity and kindness a lot more. A minute ago I heard kids playing in the streets, and there haven't been kids playing in the streets here since you were around, Sam.
I gave those streets a run for their money.
And some of the surrounding ones once you became an adult and got a bit naughty.
Yes, folks, you heard it first. I spent 2 to 3 years as a bad boy.
Sam was once naughty.
Before I realised that it was too much work.
Oh, that's the one. It's much easier to walk the line than not.
So where's all the other international customers, Sam?
Well, we probably...
I'm looking on the screen here and I'm seeing 1.5 pictures. One's in a lounge room in Melbourne.
Yeah, so look, most of these streams are watched by maximum 10, maybe 20 people, except for the one stream
They don't appear.
They don't appear. No. So this is a TV show. We're broadcasting. You guys are my special guests. You're on Fireside chats. Fireside with Sam. So can I'll go meta for a second, Dad, and give Tony the pitch or whatever. Basically, this started with me streaming my development and programming work. In fact, let me show you what I've been working on.
Is this your 3D stuff?
My 3D stuff. Hang on. So I'll show you my...
Yeah, you've been doing some nice virtual art, I've seen.
So I've like, for example, this is the... wait, hang on. I haven't done the transition yet. You got to do the transition. So I can do fades and crossfades and things like that. So it started with me streaming my development work. Essentially, is this kind of like, because I'm just like locked at home and I'm like, this is kind of a fun idea. So this is, for example, the results of this morning's work is like a computer shader that applies different textures depending on the light direction, and so it sort of like uses the shadow information.
Pine cone that you designed.
Yeah. So I did the 3D, and I also am using this program called Substance Painter. It's incredible. It's mind blowing what you can do. So you have this thing called a UV map, which is like each vector of the 3D object is then represented in 2D, and then you can paint the object, and then this program lets you paint it really intelligently. So it figures out all the relationships between everything else, so that you're just like applying
from
these
the light
layers.
Directions. Wow.
Yeah, and so for example, like the light direction, you can be like, all right, well, how would it look if the light direction was different? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
and see all the different panels changing color. That's amazing.
So in the process, I discovered this thing called OBS, which is this like streaming platform, and it lets you change, set up all these different view modes and view ways of like different frames, and you can put in different streams and sources. And I had this old condenser mic as well, and I'm like, this is a TV show. And then Dad called last week, and I was like, all right, Dad, I'm dialing you into Sam TV. And so here we are. So I've got a question for the two of you. Pardon me?
Yeah, the two of us. Hang on, there's only one of me.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll put it to
ahead.
you. How do I deal with you can do the maths, the optimism maths of like, oh, this is going to change everything and everyone's going to be more sustainable, yada, yada, yada. And I feel like as a lefty and a progressive, everything I think is like, this is going to be the thing that tips us over the balance. You know what I mean? And I've been saying that about climate change for my whole life, and nothing ever does. How do you deal with the fact that we're sort of like in the throes of this collective madness? When you look at, say, what's happening in America, the leading state, maybe a failing state, how do we fight the fact that the decision makers are greedy and corrupt? How do we keep doing the maths? How do we get beyond the idea that, this will be the thing that makes them rational and reasonable, and address the fact that we're led by these sort of corrupt, self-serving, and in many ways sort of like suicidal individuals.
Self-serving, but to their own eyes, looking out from within, they are only acting to preserve their family. So they're acting from the highest of noble ideals. So what looks like a criminal behavior, look at like Al Capone and the empires of the gangsters. Those guys owned all the politicians, and they were fully legit up until the last minute when they weren't. And there's nothing changed. These guys are making their own laws, and they're deciding who gets to go where and what amount of money gets shuffled here and there. And do you want to be one of them?
I want to.
Much, yeah.
I guess maybe if it means that I can keep my family safe. But for the moment, I want good sense to prevail, I guess. But then I just keep looking at, at a certain point with this, I've been like, well, at a certain point, the deaths will get to the point where everyone says, oh, this has been like a smoke and mirrors, like marionette show. Like we get it now. Donald Trump's been lying. Boris Johnson's been lying. I get it. You know what I mean? But the numbers are going up. And instead of people getting it, they're starting to say things like, how many deaths is it worth it to keep the economy going? Because the narrative, the global narrative is so controlled by these particular set of interests that they just can control the conversation. So how is it possible to look at, well, this is obviously the rational result. How do we expect that? What's the tipping point where everyone's like, oh, we get it now. Let's be sustainable and local? Because Dad keeps saying this stuff, and that's what I was saying too. And now I'm looking at it, I'm like, I think we're at least in, maybe we're rational individuals, but we're looking at like this collective madness where they're opening up states in America, and how do we reconcile those two positions, I guess, and what's the solution?
My take on some of that is that we're either knowledge-based, as we have been very well with good outcomes in Australia, or we are ignorance-based, or we are bully-based. And the best example of bully-based, of course, is Trump, who just goes, I'm going to out-bully this virus. No little virus is going to tell me to pull in my country's economics. And, of course, the bigger picture that I'd like to present this very wonderful afternoon is the idea of full value money, that the idea of economy and the human means of exchange is very much of interest. If you redefine what we value, then we can come out of the other side of all of this with a shift in what we value. And many people have heard of ethical investments. Many people understand the circular economy, and there's a whole lot on the internet to do with the new economy. There's an Australian movement, which is part of an international movement, talking about the new economy, which says, in effect, or in my language, it says, money is a human construct. If we made up the concept, and it helped rapidly get us where we are today, but it has carried the ethics of capitalism, which is no ethics except self-gain. And so it allowed and supported and traded in slavery because there was no ethics. We have current slaves, in essence, in Bangladesh and so on. But all of what's happened has given us pause to say, what will we reward or dissuade from continuing clearing forests in Malaysia for oil palm? Okay, there's money, but without ethics. You put ethics through the filter of decisions across 200 years. What's of value to us and the remnants of the biosphere, because that's what we're down to. There's more biomass in us humans than all the other creatures put together. There's just heaps of us. And the lower the impact per person, given that we like to live in suburbia, given that we need food and water and shelter and safety and all of Maslow's needs, when you've got all of that, then you know in the end that on top of that, you need energy and you need a sense of purpose and personal worth, and E for effort, self-help. So I'm advocating little community food, water, collection, storage, and local youth gardens with concepts of socialising in ways that say, what can we do to reduce our biophysical impact? What can we do to reduce the ecological footprint which each of us is responsible for? What can we do so that we have less of an impact than more than twice what the planet can provide as we currently operate?
Can I ask a question? It'd be weird if you said no. So this idea of like collectivism, local collectivism, is something I'm really passionate about, and I completely agree. How do we reconcile and stay motivated doing that when we are, islands in a sea of madness, and it doesn't matter how many green food gardens we grow if the bulk of society is still shipping plastic toys back and forth and spewing carbon? How do we practice social distancing and have, sensible, keep it to yourself, touch nothing, yada yada barbecues in amidst the pandemic, when any one other person could be interacting with the insane or people part of that system. You know, how does localism work when globalism is killing us?
Well, it's back to who's in charge of your body. So you don't let people touch you, and you don't touch stuff that all of the touch points that we're increasingly aware of as transmission points. We all know how to sneeze now. I'm predicting that we won't have too many influenza outbreaks this season globally, because at last we've all learned interpersonal hygiene. Somewhat belated, but better than dying.
I've been washing my hands wrong the whole time.
I sterilise mine about 5 times a day, and that's when I'm home by myself.
I guess that makes sense for pandemic stuff, and you know that's where we can control our bubbles. But then you bring it broader to the most pressing question about species is climate, is how do we reconcile, you know, hey, we're getting it right and these bubbles are getting it right, but it doesn't matter because Donald Trump is still spewing hot air, you know, and pollution metaphorically and physically and literally. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you stay motivated planting a garden knowing that there's still carbon spewing out there, you know?
Look, it's taken me until about 2 months ago of being trained and encouraged and fed good information to think about this since I was a little kid with the Burnie Inquiry, which pretty well what you just said overall. And it is that you, very recent realisation, you can only actually do things where you physically are. So you can only actually do stuff in your neighbourhood. You can put stuff out, but in the physical world that we actually occupy, where we can render physical change in this physical world, it is local. And so if all of the little drops of water in the bucket go, we're a bucket of water, then we are. If we each go, oh, we're only a drop, we make no difference. It is the totality of our individual and whatever clumps of peoples that we are in our various societies and structures. We're all members of other groups and larger groups and on and on and on. And we all have individual and whatever quantum of collectivism that we have. Townsville as a city has X impact and so on and so on. If we say as a clump, what can Townsville do to reduce our biophysical impact as a collection of 200,000 people, which I think we're capable of, as a test case for other places, and say, here was our electricity in before the virus, because we've got a whole bunch of good records. Let's see, as we come out of the virus time, that we permanently have dropped our electricity use by 20% overall, so we don't need the new whatever. We look at the Galilee Basin and we go, we're burning poor quality coal. We need residual good high quality coal for a lot of high end things like making steel, and we all use and like steel. Big thumbs up for steel. So it's a matter of using knowledge to go, what do we value in the 200-year measure? What does money signal now? Cheap toys going to Kmart. What's wrong with that? It's an absolute waste of everyone, and I see it in Garbutt, for those who know Townsville. I see it all the time on the nature strips of the poor, is broken plastic junk waiting to finally be collected. So there's a throughput of trashy stuff, and there's things that will last and serve us well for 200 years, like a well-made stainless steel frying pan. Go for the 200-year rule. Go for what do we really value? How do we signal that and change the signals with money to involve ethics and the long-term and a moral principle that we, because we made up money, can say that's what we mean by a fair and ethical transaction, and we'll tolerate no other kind from now on.
How do we make so those moral choices that we can make individually, how do we make them more accessible to lower income people. 'Cause I just to draw a parallel to the pandemic stuff is that you can afford to choose the touch points, but someone that can't afford not to go work at McDonald's because, whatever, and it's more of a case in America. And I think it's a great micro of the macro of, how much you can participate in that sort of like local good decision making. How do you make those abilities to choose healthy foods, choose lasting products, something that's more accessible? What's the answer there?
It's if whatever's easiest, we'll go for it. So, or whatever's cheap enough, we'll go for it.
Gardens, you don't need any money.
If you grow your own gardens, it's harder. Like I'm growing my own kale and spring onions and things. I've got the luxury of having private outdoor land, so I grow fruit trees and things like that to get mandarins and so on. So, one of the privileged, lucky ones. And if you're renting, if you're doing it tough, if things are difficult just getting through each day, then the idea in my projected world post-COVID, as we emerge from COVID, is to say, let's have just community meeting places, just where people can go sit under a tree somewhere and start getting together. And I'll give you the best example that I can of what I'm talking about. This Anzac Day just gone, for any Australians watching this, they may, and Sam, you too, may or may not have participated. In my street, more than half of the people got out there pre-dawn. I had on Dad's old flying hat, as you would, from the bombers of the Second World War, and my uncle Ben's box, of course, old wooden box that was made by. So out there, more than half of the street people were standing out there pre-dawn, including Bromman, with candles and just looking at each other. And afterward, when the sun was up and that, no one said anything. We just congregated into this more than 2 meters apart circle, just where we all congregated by people gravity. And we all just quietly chatted to each other. And it was a beautiful thing. And in the older days, before we had all our modern communications and transport, intrinsically we were tied to tribes and couldn't survive otherwise. Then we were tied to neighbours, the coronation streets, if you didn't travel far from intergenerational, most people. And so you were a geography unit of villages and so on. And it's only since the last World War that people have dislocated between where they've come from and their geography, for so many of us, you and me included. And so the idea of having virtual friend networks, which your generation and your good self are deeply in, to older people who are used to having geography friends, to this current time where we've now got Zoom friends, but we all live in particular geographic locations. So whether it's poor people struggling, what can you do to reduce your biophysical impact? You or I would want to say to them, stop buying those rubbishy plastic toys. Stop drinking excessively if you are. Stop smoking fags if you are, because they cost a lot of money. And how come you've got such a great big TV screen in your lounge room? I haven't got one of them. And then how do you revalue your own behaviour?
I guess with that one, the tricky one is that for people that are taking, let's call them like, immediate gratification, is that so many elements of the economy are denied to them where you can get longer term gratification. If you know you're never going to get a house because of the way the economy works, if you know you're never going to be able to afford that stainless steel frying pan, but you still want to feel valued like a consumer. And I know a lot of people that are sort of, there's a far extreme of, the kind of like classic dull bludgery, whatever. There's a bunch of people in the middle that just like, hey, I want to participate in the economy. I want to feel like the people on TV. And JB Hi-Fi will give me a TV interest-free for 24 months. And I'm not getting a house anytime soon, so let's do it. And I'm not like that. But,
I understand that. And I also understand the disempowerment of non-ownership of property. of property of your home. When I was doing that sustainability land use study over on Palm Island 15 years ago, the main thing I got back from locals about how sustainable land use and how they wanted their community to go if they only had a say. And this was, well, tell me, that's what I'm trying to get happening here. And they said, the state owns all the properties. We can't. If we want to put up a carport, we've got to apply to have someone come in and build the carport. It might take 5 years if we ever get one. And the idea, if I want a carport, I'll get the steel over and dig the holes with some mates and some bags of cement. So that they couldn't do that. So that disempowerment is profound. And there are, as you'd know, and a lot of people, if anyone's listening from Fitzroy and the likes of social advancement on the planet, is that you can get cooperatives in Victoria, at least I think still, where you can start rent buying your property, and it is one of those sort of rolling things where as you slowly pay it off,
Really?
then somebody else can get onto that scheme. So there are tunnels out for the lucky few, but it all involves a lot of personal effort, self-help. I'm a big proponent. Self-empowerment, self-awareness, self-help. You know, get out of bed and go for whatever's going to work for you.
So let's dial it. If it's okay, we're coming to the end of the segment, so I just wanted to, a question that's kind of come up in my mind in the context of the disempowered, let's call them, and of wherever they sit on that scale in the sea of madness. Like right now, we're in bubbles of sanity. I share my life with a group of people that all take meaningful action and mostly as a result don't have to rub against the infected or the carbon, creators or whatever. But there's people that are just out there that are, trying to participate in the economy, trying to not necessarily, be a big self-help guru or anything like that, but do care about everything like social good, let's say, and maybe care more about that for the world than for themselves because it's easy to care for others sometimes. What do you think someone that's just, let's call them just the middle of the spectrum, goes to Kmart, has Macca's every so often, and really that's not the problem. That's almost like one of the offshoots of the problem. It's a symptom of the problem of the system they participate in, because that's where their satisfaction is most easily available. What can the regular person, let's say, do to help drive towards this localized sustainable economy that you speak of and feel like they're having an impact on that broader system as well?
If you embrace the idea of you can only actually do things where you are, it's just the physicality of our existence, then you can do things in your home, on your property, in nearby public parks, of which in towns we have a lot. And the idea that where the weeds grow long is probably where the soil's more fertile and they're more naturally watered, and so potential community food gardens. Now, why on earth would anyone want to do that? And the answer is that if of all of the studies and all of the experiences, and again, Melbourne was one of the very forerunners in Australia of having community gardens, and as you know, some of those are still going. The benefits of having community gardens are fabulous, as well as the food, but the social aspects, that sense of being part of community, is core to a lot of mental health and so on, physical and mental health. So it's good for that. Why would somebody want to join? The best answer that I can hope for is that with this relative confinement that we've all suffered or revelled in, as it may be, over recent months, and those restrictions are lifting more rapidly here in Queensland, perhaps than in Victoria. We have abattoirs here as well, but we've had no outbreaks, etc. Is that the people who are in the lower socioeconomic slab, what can they do to generate dough that has low impact on the environment? During these last 2 months, us who have cars, which is the vast majority in Townsville, have driven a whole lot less. We've learned to plan our trips more, and the impact that we've had, and indeed the impact on global oil prices, is a very good indicator in the clear skies that everybody keeps talking about. We've actually taken our foot off of what I call the frenzied life that us humans have spiraled ourselves into in the last 300 years. It's given us, for the first time ever, and with the communications to share the thinking about these things, it's given us time to pause in our frenzy. Railway lines are less than 200 years old. The frenzy that we've had since electricity and air flight and so on, and wars indeed of greater proportion, have all been enormous and unprecedented. And suddenly we're all told globally, and know it, driven by knowledge. In the end, the bullies never win, and Trump might be let off in a straitjacket eventually. His grasp of reality as displayed through knowledge rather than bullying and who he knows is a stark fissure in his sanity. So back to our local Townsville people, just encourage people to get out and yap with each other more as we slowly start walking around more. We're re-anchored at home for the first time, probably for many people in their lives. They're not on holiday in Bali, they're actually in a sense on holiday at home, and a lot of engagement with a lot of very interesting things, maybe some new products, maybe some innovation, maybe some local things that to help people put up their sheds or their carports, or do collective things like help somebody flatten off a piece of ground, or do some top dressing for their lawn, or build a carport, or figure out ways to be able to buy their own homes if they're down the bottom of the ladder a bit.
So if I can share my own experience as someone that's, I guess, let go of the sort of like radical top-down Uber app, you know, we'll fix the world with like one new law or whatever, and then bought into the idea 3 or 4 years ago of like heavily, you know, community network, social-based, went veggie, ride my bike everywhere, volunteer with asylum seekers, planted a garden, you know, and then more often I still keep bumping against people buying second plastics, and at a certain point you're just like, I think like, I'm acknowledging it and realizing it and talking to you and thinking about it, is it requires probably more patience than I expected. You know, I thought that if I did my individual change now, if, you know, that drop in the bucket, you know, hey, I made the switch, everyone, and it hasn't happened for everyone else yet. And I'm like, well, how long am I going to have to keep eating veggie patties? You know, like, you got to eat a veggie patty too. And at what point do we say, like, all right, let's put all the, you know, the carbon producers in jail and have a caliphate out of Canberra? You know, like, how long do I have to keep riding my bike before the revolution?
Careful what you wish for. My projection hope, and there are some bright bunnies in the feds, is that having given this knowledge-based decision-making a spin, ScoMo and co, having created new federalism, as in proper federalism for the first time here, tick. The idea of doing knowledge-based, let me think now, that's right, considering the long-haul sustainability of our largely urban-based and increasingly urban-based behaviour, let's get that carbon down, the fossil carbon down. Let's meet as many of the local needs for food, water, energy storage as well locally, through community aspiration of re-energising people, but in a let's get out there and get our hands dirty. Where can we put up a public shelter with a roof with some water tanks coming off it and some solar panels and battery storage, where we can have barbecues and grow things on a Saturday afternoon and just tune out because we're free. We've been let out of our coops again.
Well, look, I think that's a wrap. Thanks so much. Look, I'm gonna let a little secret out. That's my dad. Very proud to say it. And I just also wanted to put a shout out that it is his birthday today. So we've got a message here. I don't know, Dad, if you look down on the screen, I'm going to Bunnings tomorrow. Popped up right underneath me. So you've done it.
Yeah.
If you can
It's
convince,
in time.
if you can convince one person, you can convince 1,000.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a good thing. Yeah, get out and talk to your neighbours, but keep your distance. Don't touch anything yourself. Mind out for the sneezes and so on. We're smart enough to get back out there, but we can make a new lower thing where we walk or don't go at all, because we've planned a trip that goes to 6 places in one loop instead of 6 different drives. Just get in the car. We've gotten used to not driving so much, us who do drive. The thought of driving now, you do screen time instead of going to work 5 days a week like in the old days and polishing your nails or whatever you used to do. You might only go in once a fortnight to talk crap and have a very long morning tea with your compatriots and get your little work community food and sustainable energy and water storage and collection, garden, talking about sustainability going. Haven't worked out the title yet, but that's the ticket.
If I can share just one thing, I spent 6 months. Dad's got a fully off-grid sustainable property made out of recycled building materials. That's a good way to describe a 40-year-old humpy that he's built over his entire life. It's cool. It's like runs on about a kilowatt of.
40-year-old.
Well, that's because I gave
45-year-old 45-year-old humpy. Thank you.
Well, that was because I gave it such a glow. It sounded like it was like a grand design. So it's an incredible property. I spent 6 months there. 6 months where it was kind of like isolation. You had to think about when you wanted to go out. You had to, just spend a lot of time doing what you're doing and considering it. And I came out of it more aware of what my day-to-day was and more thoughtful about how I used it. And so I do hope that that's the case. I guess I'm feeling a bit less optimistic at the moment, just seeing that, the powers that be still railing against, the change, but maybe that's just what the powers that be do. So I hope you're right, Dad. I hope you're right.
Look, my summary is we're 90% there in terms of our structures and behaviour and knowledge and networks and so on, and our means of communication, screen rather than jet or car, transformative 2 months tick, that if we do come out of it with the goal, conscious each of us and local to our works and schools and homes and normal old destinations, that to be a bit mindful of each other and to look for opportunities to rejoice at a local level of this re-emergence into the new local economy, be that as it may, which is exchange that may have nothing to do with money at all, but just endorphins, exchange of endorphins and music and the like.
Love it. Thanks so much for coming on, Dad. I hope you have a really good party. All right, now I'm going to switch to break view and turn that off and that off.